We are right at 11:30, so we're going to go ahead and formally get started with the session, folks. Welcome to the fourth in our Entrepreneurs Education Collaborative series on the COVID-19 Small Business Recovery Series. Today's session is titled, How Small Businesses Can Navigate Through This Crisis. My name is Blake Martin. I'm a member of the Entrepreneurs Education Collaborative, or EEC, and the SCORE Mentors volunteer. The EEC, who is hosting this series, is a collective effort of the following community resource providers: Better Business Bureau, Bunker Labs, Catholic Charities, Greater Omaha Chambers Reach Initiative, the Nebraska Enterprise Fund, the Nebraska Business Development Center, SCORE Mentors of Greater Omaha, and the U.S. Small Business Administration. So I'm sure all of you memorized that, but just suffice to say, an alphabet soup of all the great resource providers in town. We're going through some really strange times for sure right now, but the EEC is here to help at no cost the small business owners and operators that are going to be the backbone of our near-term economic recovery in this community. So a few housekeeping items for everybody before we get started. Whether you're watching and listening on this Zoom platform or on Facebook Live, which is at facebook.com/groups/GOC.reach. Please be aware that all participants are going to be muted throughout this session. So we'll be checking questions real time via both the chat function here in Zoom and any comments that you submit on that Facebook page. So of course, feel free to submit questions that you have during and after the presentation, and we're going to do our best to answer all of those questions today. Today's session will be recorded and posted to those same two Facebook pages. So now I have the pleasure of introducing our presenters today, and I want to give a special thanks to both Melissa and Steve because they are some of the busiest people in the world right now. They are right in the middle of the firing lines of implementing these new funding programs that have rolled out federally over the last couple of weeks and over the last couple of days. Melissa Glenn is the U.S. Small Business Administration Relationship Manager for Core Bank. Steve Knapp is the Executive Vice President of Lending for Core Bank. On today's call, amongst other things, they're going to talk a little bit about actions that small business owners can take in a crisis like this, the importance of avoiding rash decisions, and updates on the SBA and other disaster relief options. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Melissa and Steve. We will unmute your lines and set you up. And thank you very much for joining us today.
Blake, thank you. And again, thank you to everyone who has organized this call. I know we're all busy, and Steve and I were just joking about that earlier of, things are changing hourly, and we kind of feel like we're trying to change a tire while going 60 miles an hour down the interstate, but we're getting it done, and we're all going to get there. And I know there are a lot of questions. So, we just wanted to talk through, one, Steve is going to talk through what are just some tips for business owners right now to try to stay calm, what to do in the face of pressure. So what are some of the things that he's learned throughout his career? And I'm going to go into, some of the updates on the CARES program and the payment protection program and, what we're seeing from that aspect as well. So I guess just to start off, Steve, if you want to just give us a little bit of your background and, some of the things that you've seen throughout your career and some of the advice that you would give to small business owners right now.
Sure. Thanks, Melissa. And thanks to the entire group listening here today. So my career has been a long career, all in banking, some at larger banks and some at the smaller community banks, such as Core. And over my career, I'm not sure that I've seen as drastic of an economic time as we're facing right now. Plus, probably I've not seen as drastic of an economic stimulus as we're being offered today, too. and there are a lot of resources out there. I would just say that, small businesses are carrying the brunt of what's happening today with the restaurant business, the entertainment business, lodging, sporting events, as simple as people that supply the caps and gowns for high school graduations, that are not going to take place. You just can't measure the depth of this pandemic and what it's causing to small businesses. So my hat's off to anybody that has had the guts and the willpower to hang in there. Just a couple of other things, and this is a little self-serving for us bankers, but as a small business is facing these, pandemic times, one of the best things that they can do is to be in constant contact with their banker, keeping them informed about what is happening in their business from the point of, suppliers, taking them to a cash on delivery kind of a supply chain to, automatic payment debits that are coming out of their deposit account to pay for goods or services that, quite frankly, they may want to stop to coming through so they can conserve cash. So anyway, keeping all of those communication lines open and frequent with your trusted advisors. That's probably one of the most important things. And then Melissa will get into the Paycheck Protection Program, but that's probably something that if they haven't already, they better get their application filed immediately. Melissa?
Yeah. Immediately is a good piece of advice. I know we have a lot of questions, so we want to try to leave as much time as we can for that. But quick update on CARES and Payment Protection Program. So I know there's been a lot of information thrown around out there, and quite frankly, we're learning information hourly as it comes out. So first of all, the CARES Act was passed, huge stimulus portion, huge stimulus package. And from that, a big piece of it is the Payment Protection Program. So that's essentially a $350 billion program that is open to small business, and I'll get into what that means here in a minute, open to small business for simply the purpose of keeping people employed and keeping the lights on. So this is a short-term program. However, we're seeing a lot of, lasting results that can come from something like this. Just like Steve said, we are in a very weird time where we don't know exactly when the economy is going to come back. We have every reason to believe that the economy will come back extremely strong, when it does. But for right now, we're trying to figure it out. And that is really what the Payment Protection Program addresses. So on the outset, the program itself will allow you to borrow the average of 1 month of your payroll from 2019. So that means, obviously pay. It means the dollars that you pay for employee benefits, 401k, does not include federal taxes or Social Security from our understanding. So essentially you take your 2019 average monthly dollar amount, you can multiply that by 2.5, and that is the total dollar amount that you can borrow. Now the proceeds of those funds need to go toward at least 75% payroll. So again, the whole point here is to make sure that you can keep people employed. The other 25%, if there's any left over, can be used toward rent, utilities, the interest payments on any existing debt obligations. So that includes mortgage. It will not include SBA payments, which I'll get into in a moment as well. But again, make sure that when 2 months down the road, when we're going back and we're looking at the forgiveness piece of this loan, you've been keeping all of your receipts, all of your records, and that you've only been spending those funds, those dollars, on those 4 things I just mentioned. So payroll, at least 75%. The other 25% could be used toward rent, utilities, and interest on existing debt obligations. Now I've gotten a lot of questions as well, and we'll open it up for questions after this. Gotten a lot of questions on the EIDL and how does that come into play. The EIDL, or disaster relief, disaster loan, essentially runs directly through the SBA. So you do not apply with a bank for the EIDL loan. However, for those people who have already received funds from the EIDL, those funds can be refinanced into the payment protection program. So again, we take the 2.5 times your average monthly payroll for 2019. We would add in the money that you've already received for the EIDL, and we'd refinance that all into one package. Now, forgiveness. We've gotten a lot of questions on how this is going to work, and stay with us. Stay with your banker. There are a lot of unknowns on this. What we do know so far, though, is that from the time of the fund of dispersed, basically from the date of origination on the payment protection program, for the next 8 weeks, the money that you spend should be tracked, and anything that, again, is a qualifying expense can be forgiven. Now, there will be an application for this. The application will go through the bank where you had the loan originated from. We don't have a whole lot of details on that yet. So what I've been advising clients to do, again, is to keep meticulous records, save receipts, save those screenshots, printouts, whatever it is, so that we can show exactly how those funds were spent. And you know that you're not being put into a worse situation later if we can't get those funds forgiven. Now, on the total dollar amount of funds, up to 2 months of the 2.5 months that you've borrowed can be forgiven. So that means there theoretically could be more money that's left over on the loan that isn't forgiven. Now those details have changed several times. So we saw interest rates go from 4% down to 0.5%. But the final ruling on this is that anything left on the loan will be termed out to a 2-year note at 1% interest rate. So if you've seen anything else, just know it's 2 years, 1%. Now I've seen all kinds of other information out there regarding grants, small business grants. That all is running through the SBA, so it's probably not what you're going to be working with your banker on. However, what I would say is keep in touch with everyone regarding the rest of the programs. Right now, from a banking world, and I would imagine from the accounting world as well, and legal world, we're all focused on the payment protection program. So that's kind of our big focus. Now, one other piece, earlier I mentioned the payments that are going to be made for SBA loans directly from the SBA. Now, we're still working on mechanics of how all of this will work, and waiting to hear back from the SBA on some of the mechanics on how this will work. But what we understand so far is that the concept is pretty simple. For payments that are essentially due now, starting in April, for any existing SBA loan that is in good standing, the SBA will be making full payments, so principal and interest, for the next 6 months. Now, this is huge because we're not talking about a deferral. We're not tacking on 6 months at the end of the loan. We're not talking about just interest only or payments deferred, kind of like they are on student loans right now. We're talking about actual payments that are being made to your bank that will cover your SBA loan payment for the next 6 months. So I think there are a lot of small business owners right now, especially SBA clients, that are rejoicing on some of that news. But again, some people had payments that have already, tried to pull. Again, there's a process. Each bank is working through that process to make sure that the full 6 months is made whole. And we're going to be obviously working with clients. So whether you're with Core Bank or not, again, just like Steve said, reach out to your banker and keep them informed of where this is at, what you've already seen come out. And then, I think I can speak for all bankers when I say this, is we're working our tails off to make sure we're getting the information out to you as quickly as we can and as accurately as possible. So I think that is the update on the CARES and PPP, and we wanted to leave as much time as possible for questions because I know there's a lot of concern out there. There's a lot coming in. So Samantha, Blake, Jim, whoever is fielding questions, I want to give everyone a minute to pop those into
Thanks, Melissa.
that
And
section, but shoot those out.
a quick reminder to everybody: use the chat function on the bottom of your screen with the Zoom portal to chat any questions, including if you simply wanted a reclarification on anything that Melissa already talked about. We're all getting bombarded with a lot of information. If you're listening on Facebook Live, go ahead and type in your question in the comments section, and we'll try to get that answered for you as well. So again, if you can't see the chat function on Zoom, just bring your cursor down to the bottom of the screen, and you'll see a little ribbon of pop-ups, including the chat icon. You can type in any question you have there.
And Blake,
I'll turn it over to Samantha and Jim to pop questions over to Melissa and Steve.
And I have the first question from Facebook Live. When will payments be made to small businesses? So I'm assuming that's if they qualify for the PPP. So maybe you can just walk them through that process.
Yeah, good. That's a fantastic question. And again, that's one of the big unknowns, and that's the mechanics of how this will work, that we don't have exact dates on that yet. We have heard from the SBA, though, to expect that April payments are made. However, and again, we have a process in place for core, so we know what's expected, and we know what we would have received in some of those automatic drafts, for example, from clients. And I'm sure every bank is working on that, but reach out to your banker and make sure you're on the same page, because what we don't want to have happen is you just don't make a payment. The bank wasn't prepared, or they didn't receive funds. We don't want you to get hit with anything on the back end. So a lot more to come from the SBA. We have heard, though, that it will be payments made starting in April.
Yeah, and then the PPP, Melissa and Steve, you probably know, once the loan's approved through the PPP, how long does it take to get that money dispersed?
Yeah, good question. For current clients, that's pretty quick. They already have an account with us. We have a place for those funds to go. So I'm not holding anyone to any specific deadlines, but I will say that process is quick. Again, we're working with each one of our clients on that. And for a lot of banks, we're in a spot too where we have a lot of new clients coming into the bank, which is absolutely fantastic. Know that the process does take a little bit longer on that side too, just because, one, priority is given to current clients, but two, we also need to make sure that new accounts are being opened and established before we can put those funds into the account. So, what I would say is that on some points, it could take as little as, a matter of days. On others, it might take a couple of weeks, but just, again, work with your banker and know that we are trying to get these things processed as quickly as humanly possible, and make sure the funds are out to businesses to use right away.
This is Steve Knapp. I might just jump in and add just a couple of color commentary pieces to this. As Melissa said, we're trying to expedite the process. And just for recollection, there's the PPP application, which is a 4-page application that has to be thoroughly filled out, properly signed, initial things in that nature. Then you have to have the document that verifies, if you will, your compensation that you're applying for. And remember, applicants cannot submit an individual's compensation over $100,000. So those have to be pared back. Then to verify that compensation, we're asking for the applicant's 941 tax forms. So you've got a kind of a belt and suspenders check process. Once we get that, we have to go through and do our own due diligence. And again, as Melissa said, existing clients already have their beneficial ownership forms and their articles of incorporation, bylaws on file, because the SBA is requiring us to validate those documents. We submit it to the SBA, and as many of you heard, the SBA portal has been down. It's been difficult. There have been banks that have, I think the number I saw this morning, there were 17,000 some odd applications that have been submitted, and I don't know that very many of them have been approved because the SBA's been in flux with their website and access. But once we do get the authorization number, then we have to prepare the document. actual note that the borrower signs. So kind of from start to finish, if you can kind of visualize, as Melissa said, it could be 4 days, it could be 5 days, it could be a week, but we're trying to make it as quick as possible. But because it's a government program, we're getting updates and guidance from the SBA almost hourly. Things change. We're going to try to do it as quickly as we can.
Yeah. And one thing I want to note on here too, I'm seeing some questions flow in on the chat screen. So I'll let all of you kind of filter those as you'd like. One thing I want to stress though is the program is open right now. The PPP is open to small businesses and sole proprietorships starting April 3rd. Now, independent contractors and self-employed individuals, we've been told that the program will open up to them on April 10th. Now, I know there are a lot of questions on, will there be money left over? You know, is the process going to be the same? Great questions for right now. You know, we quite frankly just don't know. So I'm not going to go into rumorville or what will or won't happen with that. But those are the dates that we've been given, and I haven't heard any differentiation on that from the SBA. So April 3rd for small businesses and sole proprietorships, and April 10th for independent contractors and self-employed.
So I'm going to just start going through the group chat here, and I'll start from top to bottom. If some of these are things that you feel like you've already covered, you can just say, oh, you know, we've already covered that. But I'm just going to start from the top and get rolling. Absolutely. So the first question is from Shelly. She says, will businesses that don't currently have any loans be able to apply for the new SBA program?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Good question. And I think some color on there too, because I've had that question asked several different ways from different clients. So just really quickly, if you want a brand new SBA loan, you know, you certainly can. That process will probably take a little bit longer. Now, what we have been told, though, is you can't apply for an SBA loan right now and have those payments made for the next 6 months. So the program date for the PPP is February 15th. So basically, I've seen a couple of different dates on that, but basically your loan would have had to have been originated before the beginning of the program date. But yeah, for anyone, like Steve said, for the PPP, yeah, absolutely.
The next one here is, I think, one that you actually just covered from Jay, who says, how are independent contractors and self-employed owners handled under PPP? Did you say that was April 10th? April 10th,
yep. And I haven't seen any difference on the application or anything yet. So as far as we know, it would be the same process.
Okay. Joe says, I've heard that applying for an EIDL will alter the speed at which your PPP is processed. Is this true? If I've applied for an EIDL but not received anything yet, in fact, applied after PPP, will that lower the priority of my PPP application?
I haven't seen that yet, no. The only thing that I would say is if you are expecting that you're going to receive an EIDL payment within a matter of today or tomorrow, and you'd like to refinance that, I would encourage you to roll that up into the PPP, should that be, you know, the option that you and your team have decided to go for. But no, I have not seen that the application of one or the other will slow down the process.
And Melissa, this is Jim on that topic, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is as long as the use of funds aren't the same, so you might use PPP for payroll from March 1st through May 1st, and you might use EIDL for June's payroll, and that would be okay. Okay.
Absolutely. Yep.
The next is perhaps for you, Jim.
Is
NEF like making any PPE loans or only banks?
Right now, only banks. We looked at the options, but the back end, some of the things that Melissa and Steve have to do on the KYC, know your customer, makes it really difficult for us to do some of the same program.
Sure. Okay, and then this one looks like it's from Facebook. Is workers' comp, health insurance, are those included just like payroll? And similarly, there was another question about, can PPP be used for payroll taxes?
Good question. Now on the front end for what you can borrow, yes, you can include things like workers' comp, the health insurance. There was some confusion on this as well, but our understanding is that you cannot include federal taxes or Social Security on the breakdown of what you can borrow, but you can include, the benefits side of it. Now on the back end, can those funds be used to pay payroll taxes? That I honestly don't know. I don't know if Steve, if you've heard anything there.
No, I haven't heard anything to the difference. But again, back to your earlier comment presentation, 75% of the proceeds have to be used towards payroll. My guess, the SBA is not going to interpret payroll tax payments as part of payroll because it's not going to an individual with a Social Security number. So I would doubt that you can use it for payroll taxes, but we're not the final authority on that.
From your experience, what has been the response time for EIDL? I submitted my application a week ago and have not heard anything.
Yeah, good question. Again, all of that is processed directly through the SBA, and certainly don't want to, hold them to any sort of time frame as well. Initially, what we heard was 2 to 3 weeks for EIDL. Now, I think it's probably going to be a lot longer than that. The volume was just unprecedented for people applying, and they had some website issues, and I think they changed their application to make that easier, but I would maybe give them a little bit of grace. So initially, their estimate was 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay, I've got a little bit of family noise, so I'm just going to walk in the other room here.
All right, I have 2 questions from Facebook here. One, am I able to utilize both the PPP and the 6-month assistance from the SBA?
You bet. Yep.
And then follow on, also, how do I know if my small business loan qualifies for 6 months of assistance? I think I'll stab at it first. Your banker will be getting in touch with you if you have an SBA loan that qualifies and let you know which loan that is and how it works. Melissa, do you have anything to add on that one?
You're correct, Jim.
Well, the other piece is that's important is your current SBA loan that you hope to get the deferments for has to be in good standing. So not past due, not under deferment, some of those other factors that would cause it not to be qualified.
And I would say too, just like Steve said earlier, again, reach out to your banker. So as this whole thing hit and you asked for a deferment right away, maybe that was granted. Reach out to your banker because there might be, ways where you could tack that deferment onto the end of the 6 months or, whatever it is. Just work directly with your banker. Don't go silent and don't panic. Just, make a phone call.
That looks like the end of the questions in the group chat here. So I guess if there's anyone on the fence that's listening right now that has a question that they would like to ask, go ahead and pop it in the Zoom group chat right now. Also, I think, Jim, you were monitoring Facebook, so let me know if you see anything else that comes in.
I don't see any more from Facebook right now, but thanks for all the questions. I think all of them have been really great, and it's really important. Melissa's already said it. Things are changing every 2 hours, if not more. So it's really important that we keep asking, make sure you get the most recent information. I do have a couple.
This is Steve Knapp. I want to make another comment if I can for the group, and really it's, if nothing else, it's for the greater cause. Don't let the market hysteria cause you major concerns either. There are a lot of comments being made both in the local and the national market about something to the effect, well, my PPP loan has already been approved and it's been funded. The money's in my account. I'd be careful about that because there's the right way to work with the SBA and the government application process. And then there might be ways to around it that may not have all the I's dotted and the T's crossed. I don't let comments like that scare you if you haven't heard from your bank or your banker or the SBA. That's number one. Number two is that the SBA website and some of the processing systems have never seen this kind of an overload of volume, and it does crash and it does kick you out. It's frustrating, but you have to hang in there because they're doing as good a job as they can do. They've hired a lot of people to help process this. You're not going to be forgotten, but it just may take some time. So just be careful. You've got important vision to be thinking about, and that's running your small business and making sure your small business survives. So you got to keep that positive attitude. Work with your banker. We say it and say it and say it. And maybe dispel some of those untruths that might be floating around out there.
Most definitely. And one resource too that we've put together on our website is corebank.com/coronavirus-updates. And I'll put this in the chat here as well. But again, it's corebank.com/coronavirus-updates. So make sure you're checking things out there. We're putting information up there as we have it. And this information relates to what's happening within the bank, what's happening within CoreBank, but then also the PPP, different business resources, different local resources. So again, you could check out, what's happening, what's the latest from UNMC on what they're seeing on the virus itself. But what Steve just said, I think is the point that we really need to reiterate. And I know it's difficult. And I know that right now, this maybe isn't the thing that everyone is thinking of, but if you are in a position where your business has either slowed down or you've had to close, and for the safety of clients and customers, that's probably the right call sometimes. Don't just stop. Make sure you're working on your business. Make sure you're utilizing all of the resources that are available. This is a really good time to go over your budget, go over your business plan, go over your marketing strategy. Make sure you're ready, because once the economy does come back, it will come back quickly, and the people who are ready will be able to capitalize. So again, I know that's very easy to say, from a desk where you're maybe not in the driver's seat of the business right now. It's okay to take a beat and kind of feel the sting from this, but you have to keep moving forward. And there are a lot of, again, great resources to do that here. Jim, the people on this phone call can help. So, talk to SCORE, talk to NBDC, talk to your banker, and just come up with a really great strategy for how to capitalize once this comes back, because this will come back if this is a short-term scenario.
And I do have one more clarification from Facebook. I submitted my application and received an application number. Do I wait for SBA to respond before sending in forms?
Is that in regards to the PPP or the EIDL?
It doesn't say for sure, Melissa. I'm thinking it looks like an EIDL question.
Okay. I would say my assumption here is if you're asked to fill out additional forms, I'd say fill them out. What normally happens through an SBA process is you're going to get a loan number. And what that essentially means is that your loan has been added to the bucket, and the amount of money that you've asked for is likely reserved. So it may not have been funded yet, but the SBA set that aside. Now, I'm sure that this will change as more banks are added, but on the PPP side, it's kind of the same thing. We'll probably need more documentation. But the last number I saw was something like $1 billion going out per hour. That's unprecedented volume. So the biggest thing too is to make sure that you can get some sort of confirmation that your money has been reserved, so that you can be part of that billion per hour number.
So they do have an application number, and they did say it's an EIDL. Okay. So if you've sent in the forms required, you're good. If you still need to send in some of the required forms, get those in. If SBA needs additional information, they'll ask you for it.
Correct.
Thank you. This is Blake again. Again, before I provide some closing comments and some details on upcoming sessions, Any other questions that either you see, Jim, or Samantha, that you see in the chat box?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, let me just go through a couple of closing items. And as we're doing that, if anybody thinks of a final question or comment, feel free to post them there and we will review those. First of all, let me just thank Melissa and Steve again for an outstanding, I have to tell you, as a small business owner myself in this community, that was incredibly helpful, real practical advice. So thank you for that. My biggest takeaway was if you have questions or you're not sure what to do next or how soon to do it, reach out to your banker or lender. If that's not a relationship that you have or it's not viable for some reason, reach out to one of the resource providers that are part of EEC, whether that's Nebraska Enterprise Fund, Nebraska Business Development Center, the folks at REACH, the folks at SCORE, et cetera, et cetera. Reach out to those folks and we will find you the right person to talk to get that answer.
Hey, Blake.
As far as yeah.
This is Steve. I want to inject another comment, and I know I interrupted you, but Melissa appreciates that all the time. There are some banks that may not be participating in the PPP program. Okay. I can't name all the names, but there are some banks that have decided to participate, partially because they're not an SBA lending bank. It's not their area of expertise. Number two, the first blush, as Melissa said, when we saw it was going to be a 4% interest rate, we're like, wow, that's great. That's higher than most of the rates we're getting today anyway. And it precipitously fell to a 0.5% interest rate, which caused a bunch of banks to take a step back because that's probably lower than our cost of funds. They just raised that to a 1% rate late last week. The point being is there are some banks that may not be participating. So what you need to do as a small business owner and entrepreneur is seek out banks that are participating in the program and get the application in and expedite it. The difficulty with that is that if it's not your bank, you do have to go through the know your customer, as Jim said at the beginning of the show, know your customer forms, articles of incorporation, things like that, because those will be required. So just a word of caution and support out there.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate that clarification. That's very helpful. And it's absolutely the case. Those are some of the questions we've gotten from folks about now what do we do if our bank isn't participating? So appreciate that. I haven't seen any other questions come in, but just note in regards to the next session in this ongoing series, which we intend to continue through April, you'll notice in the chat box on Zoom, as well as the Facebook Live comments, I just posted the link to the next session, which is this Wednesday. It's bomb-proofing your virtual meetings. So we've all been on a lot more virtual meetings. We've all been hoping and praying that we're not the host or participant that makes that mistake. And Ron Werner, who is a professor of cybersecurity at Bellevue University and owns his own cybersecurity business, is going to talk in practical terms about how exactly to make your virtual meetings more effective and more efficient and more user-friendly. So again, that'll be at 11:30. All these sessions will be at 11:30 this Wednesday, and the registration link was just sent. You can also look on both of our platforms that you're watching or listening to or looking at the recording on after this session. And the information will be there for the upcoming sessions. Another upcoming session, which we just booked, is on the 15th, which is next Wednesday, with a employment and labor law partner from Baird Home Law Firm. And he will be talking about employment law and employment best practices in this strange new environment. So again, another opportunity for real practical information that should be applicable to every business owner and operator out there. As I had mentioned in that overview, today's session has been recorded, including this Q&A at the end, and we will be posting the recording in on those two platforms, the Facebook Live, which is facebook.com/groups/GOC.reach. And then also we'll be posting that on our EEC, or Entrepreneurs Education Collaborative page of Facebook. So you just go into Facebook and type in Entrepreneurs Education Collaborative. As I said before, session 5 in this series, which we will be continuing through April, will be this Wednesday at 11:30, and that's going to be bomb-proofing your virtual meetings. If you see anything that you're wondering about or have questions about, remember the resource providers that are a part of this are more than happy to provide answers to any questions that you have and to get you to the folks who can provide those answers for you. I want to thank again on behalf of the entire EEC, both Melissa and Steve with Core Bank for dedicating their time, donating their time at a time that is more busy than you've ever seen in your careers, I'm sure. So we thank you so much for volunteering your time. Let me just ask one more time of Samantha and Jim if there's any comments or chat questions that have come in as I'm going through this closing.
I don't see any specific. I just make a note. If you do have questions on the EIDL, they have both a helpline you can call and a web or an email address. I suggest you call them and then send an email. If you have information, somebody asked, well, I have an application number, put that in your email so they can find your loan or your application and get back to you correctly. If you have a question about PPP, talk to your local banker first. They're the ones that will be able to help you process it. Samantha?
Nothing from me.
Thank you for having us, everyone, and best of luck. We'll get through this.
Thank you.
Thank you all. We hope to see you again Wednesday at 11:30 for the bomb-proofing your virtual meetings. And one more thanks to Core Bank, both Melissa and Steve. Hope all of you have a wonderful day and stay strong. We'll get through this together.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.